What if I told you that awakening your consciousness does not demand hours of sitting in silence, nor years of ascetic retreat, but could begin with something so small, so simple that it almost seems invisible? A single pause, a single breath, a single moment of awareness between one thought and the next. We live in a culture that teaches us that change must be monumental, that transformation must arrive like a lightning strike, sudden and overwhelming. Yet, the deeper truth, the one both mystics and modern science whisper to us, is that consciousness begins to awaken not in great leaps, but in quiet, nearly imperceptible shifts. The soul awakens like dawn, not like fire, slowly, gently, and inevitably, if only we allow. Perhaps you have felt the weight of repetition in your own life, waking each day with the sense that yesterday has returned, wearing a different mask, carrying grief, disappointment, or the ache of dreams deferred, while still hoping that something will break the cycle. Maybe you have tried to think more positive, to repeat affirmations, to push yourself toward light, but the wheel keeps spinning, dragging you back into the same emotional groove. If you know this exhaustion, you are not alone. Millions walk this same path, caught in the loops of an unconscious mind that repeats what was once learned, even when it no longer serves. Science tells us that as much as 95% of our daily actions, emotions, and thoughts are governed not by choice, but by subconscious programs installed long ago. Spirituality tells us something even deeper, that in forgetting the present, we forget the divine pulse of life itself. But here is the paradox. You do not need to erase all the past in order to awaken. You do not need to fight the subconscious as if it were your enemy. What if these programs are not evil or broken, but simply outdated recordings, like old songs playing on repeat? They are not malicious. They are just memories that were never questioned. Bruce Lipton reminds us of this truth. The subconscious is not bad. It is simply old. And if it is old, it can be renewed. This is where micro-meditations, those small moments of stillness scattered throughout an ordinary day, become not trivial gestures, but doorways to the quantum. With just 2 minutes of silence, the brain shifts from the hurried beta waves of survival into the more open and malleable theta state, the same state where a child first absorbed the world. In that fragile, precious window, change is not forced, it is invited. Do you feel how gentle this is? How different from the pressure to meditate for hours, to achieve states of bliss, or to climb mountains of spiritual performance. Micro-meditations do not ask you to withdraw from life. They invite you to return to. Imagine being at your desk, about to answer an email, and instead pausing for 60 seconds, or standing in the kitchen, glass of water in hand, and closing your eyes for 3 breaths before drinking. Nothing extravagant, nothing that announces itself as sacred. And yet, in those seconds, the momentum of unconscious repetition is interrupted, like placing a hand upon a wheel that has spun for years. Even the slightest touch changes its rhythm. The body listens, the mind notices, the heart softens, the soul remembers. I know that many who hear these words carry silent questions that rarely leave their lips. Is it too late for me? Have I wasted my life? Has the universe forgotten me? These questions are not signs of weakness. They are signs of longing. They are the soul's way of reminding you that you were made for more than repetition. You were made for presence, for connection, for awakening. Even if you feel tired, even if you feel broken, even if you feel like hope has left, you are not beyond this grace. Because what micro-meditations teach us is that transformation does not arrive in the future. It is not waiting at the end of some long road. It begins here, now, in this very breath you are taking as you listen to my voice. So let us begin gently, without pressure, without demand. Take a breath, not a perfect breath, not a spiritual performance. Just a breath that belongs only to you. Feel the air move in, cool and quiet. Feel it leave, warm and release. Notice the silence that surrounds even the sound of your breath. This is the doorway. This is where awakening starts. Not with effort, but with a remembrance. For in every pause, in every moment of stillness, consciousness whispers back to you, I am here. I have always been here. The silent saboteur, how autopilot blocks your quantum potential. There is a hidden current that carries most of your life without you noticing. It is not the flow of destiny, nor the hand of the divine. It is something quiet, more mechanical, almost invisible. The mind on autopilot. Neuroscience reveals what spirituality has long sensed, that as much as 95% of our day is governed by unconscious patterns, repeating themselves like echoes of forgotten songs. You wake, you move, you react, and beneath it all, a script written years ago continues to play. You believe you are choosing, but often it is simply memory choosing again. This is why so many souls feel imprisoned even when they long for freedom. Have you ever wondered why the same emotions return even when you promise yourself to change? The frustration, the sadness, the fear of never moving forward. They are not proof of failure, but of program. Bruce Lipton reminds us that these subconscious recordings are not your enemy. They are simply outdated, like old photographs or worn-out tapes. They were installed without your consent, in moments of childhood, in seasons of pain, in silent repetitions that carved themselves into the nervous system. And because they were not chosen, they can be changed. Yet here lies the paradox that breaks many hearts. Positive thinking alone does not reach these depths. How many times have you repeated an affirmation only to feel the same heaviness return by evening? Words spoken in the conscious mind cannot easily penetrate the fortress of the subconscious. It resists. Not because it is evil, but because it was designed to protect what is familiar. The mind believes that sameness is safety. And so, while you whisper, "I am free," the subconscious answered, "But we have always been bound." Still, there is a way through, a way as simple as it is profound. When the mind drops briefly into theta wave, the same fertile state that a child enters before the world has fixed its limits, the door to new programming opens. And this is why micro-meditations carry such power. Even 2 minutes of silence, 2 minutes of turning inward with awareness, is enough to bypass the noisy surface of beta waves and slip beneath into the soil, where roots can be touched. What hours of struggle may not accomplish, a brief pause can begin. Picture a wheel spinning endlessly, set in motion by years of repetition. It seems impossible to stop, for the momentum is too strong. But imagine placing one finger gently against its edge. The wheel does not stop immediately, yet something changes. The rhythm falters, even slightly, and from that tiny interruption, a new possibility arises. This is the image of micro-meditation, a tender interruption in the cycle of a lifetime. Not a battle, not a war, but a pause. And in that pause, awareness returns. Perhaps you recognize yourself in this, rising each morning with good intentions only to watch the day vanish into habits you never chose, feeling as though time controls rather than you shaping time, carrying grief or loneliness that seems to repeat itself no matter what you attempt to shift. If you feel this, you are not broken. You are simply human, moving through programs that can be rewritten. Every soul has the power to touch that spinning wheel and slow its momentum. Let these words be a reminder, not of pressure, but of possibility. The smallest pull, the quietest moment, can alter the direction of an entire life. You do not need to overthrow your past in one grand gesture. You need only to remember that silence is always within reach, and that in silence, the subconscious yields. A pause of 2 minutes, repeated with intention, holds more power than hours of unconscious strive. In the stillness of such pauses, you awaken the presence that was never lost. In the silence between thoughts, you step out of autopilot and into the quantum field of choice. And in that moment, the old script begins to loosen its grip, and the story of your awakening begins to write itself. Beware of the myth of big change. So many seekers carry a secret weight, the belief that transformation must come dressed in grandeur. They imagine retreats in distant mountains, weeks of silence, elaborate rituals that demand time and resources they cannot always give. They look at their ordinary lives, full of work, family, interruption, and conclude that real change is reserved for others, for those who can afford the luxury of withdrawal. And so, while the heart longs for awake, the mind whispers, "Not yet, not here, not in this life as it is." This myth is one of the most subtle barriers on the path of consciousness. It convinces us that the sacred is elsewhere, that transformation belongs to the rare and the chosen. Yet biology itself tells another story. Bruce Lipton reminds us that cells respond less to intensity than to repetition. It is not the thunder of one great effort that rewires the body and mind, but the soft persistence of small, repeated signals. Just as water, drop by drop, carves valleys into stone, so too the smallest acts of awareness reshape the deepest structures of identity over time. Think of the brain not as a fortress, but as a living garden. Neuroscience reveals that it thrives not on force, but on gentle, consistent tending. Each time you bring a spark of presence into an ordinary moment, you plant a seed. Each time you return to that presence, you water. The soil of the mind does not flourish when drenched all at once, only to be abandoned. It flourishes when nourished in small, steady rhythms. The brain loves repetition. The soul loves gentleness. Together, they welcome transformation in whisper, not in shouts. Consider how life often trains us to believe we are conditioned to chase the extraordinary, the perfect retreat, the perfect ceremony, the perfect moment when everything aligns. Yet, when the ceremony ends, when the retreat closes, when daily life returns, many find themselves lost again, as though the sacred was left behind in that faraway place. What if the truest power lies not in the peaks, but in the valleys, not in the rare event, but in the daily ritual? This is what micro-meditations embody. Transformation, not as an escape from life, but as a subtle reweaving of life itself. Picture a moment before you send an email. The world around you rushes, screens glow, responsibilities press. Yet in that single pause, eyes closed, breath steady, you create coherence. Or imagine lifting a glass of water and before drinking, allowing silence to touch you for just 3 breaths. These are not dramatic acts. No one will notice them but you. And yet, repeated, they begin to carve new pathways in the brain, new rhythms in the heart, new patterns in the soul. Over weeks, over months, these small pauses accumulate until identity itself begins to shift. There is a tenderness in this truth. You do not need to wait for the perfect moment, for the stars to align, for a ceremony to sanctify. Your daily life is already sacred. Each ordinary gesture is an altar if you choose to meet it with awareness. Each repetition of presence, no matter how brief, is enough to rewrite what seemed unchangeable. In time, the myth of big change dissolves, and you discover that what is most transformative is also what is most simple. Do you see how this frees you? You do not need to seek what is far. You do not need to postpone your awakening for another life, another day, another chance. Transformation does not hide in the distance. It breathes in this very moment. It is as close as your next palm, your next breath, your next choice to remember that you are here. And the more often you remember, the more your life begins to flow in alignment with the deepest truth of who you are. How dopamine hijacks your meditation without you noticing. We live in a world that feeds our senses with constant sparks. Notifications, messages, endless streams of novelty arrive like waves against the nervous, each one whispering, "Look at, respond to me." Stay with. Over time, the brain adapts to this rhythm. It begins to crave the next vibration, the next sound, the next flash of stimulation, and slowly, without realizing it, we become conditioned to expect instant rewards. This is where the silent sabotage begins, even in something as sacred as meditation. Many who long for peace enter meditation, carrying an unconscious expectation that within seconds, silence will soothe, that the heart will light, that bliss will arrive like a reward. But when the body does not immediately calm, when the mind still flickers with noise, disappointment arises. This disappointment is not a sign of failure. It is the imprint of dopamine. Neuroscience shows us what Joe Dispenza often teaches. The brain's reward system has been hijacked by constant stimulation, and in comparison, stillness feels foreign, even uncomfortable. This is why so many abandon meditation after only moments. Not because they lack discipline, but because their nervous system has been trained to flee from silence. The body, accustomed to the fast drip of dopamine, resists the absence of stimulation. Stillness feels like emptiness. Silence feels like deprivation. And yet the paradox is this: true healing does not come from more stimulation, but from rebalancing the very circuits that have been distorted by excess. Meditation is not an escape from stimulation. It is a recalibration of reward, a returning to the sweetness of presence itself. Imagine a child who has eaten too much sugar. To the child, real food tastes bland. Nourishment feels uninteresting because the tongue is overstimulated. In the same way, our minds become like children addicted to candy, demanding more stimulation, resisting silence, unable to savor the natural rhythm of awareness. Micro-meditations, brief moments of conscious pause, act like gentle detox, not harsh, not punishing, but steady and kind. Each pause reminds the body that silence is not emptiness, but fullness, that stillness is not deprivation, but restoration. Consider the small act of sitting before opening a screen, before entering the world of noise, and closing your eyes for 90 seconds. 90 seconds in which the body trembles, the mind resists, the hands itch to reach for distraction. This resistance is not proof of weakness. It is proof that conditioning is being challenged. If you stay through the discomfort, even for a short time, something shifts. The brain begins to remember a rhythm older than dopamine, a rhythm of coherence, where reward is no longer found in stimulation, but in presence. Perhaps you have felt this tug of war inside you, the longing for peace, and yet the restless pull toward noise, the yearning for silence, and yet the habit of fleeing from it. If you recognize this, know that you are not failing. You are healing. Every time you return, every time you pause, every time you face the resistance and allow it to pass, you are teaching your brain to love silence again. You are rebalancing circuits distorted by a world that constantly demands your attention. And slowly, gently, a new sweetness emerges. A sweetness not found in the rush of dopamine, but in the stillness of your own presence. You discover that peace is not an instant reward, but a natural state that reveals itself when craving subsides. The mind grows quieter, the body soft, the soul remembers its own depth, and in that remembrance, meditation ceases to be a struggle. It becomes home, the hidden frequency of breath. Why micro-meditations work faster than you think? There is something so familiar, so constant, that most of us pass it by without reverence. Breath. It rises and falls whether or not we notice. Like waves against the shore, because it never abandons us. We often treat it as background, automatic, ordinary. Yet within this ordinary rhythm lies a force so profound that both ancient traditions and modern science bow before it. Breath is not simply air moving in and out of the lungs. Breath is vibration. Breath is frequency. Breath is the invisible key that tunes the body to the song of consciousness. Bruce Lipton reminds us that every breath changes the chemistry of the body. With each inhale and exhale, pH shifts, hormones adjust, cells receive new message. In this constant dance, genetic possibilities themselves open or close. What we often consider automatic is in truth an instrument of transformation. And when Joe Dispenza teaches about coherence, he shows us that even 5 conscious breaths can reset the electromagnetic conversation between the heart and the brain. 5 breaths. Just seconds, and the body begins to hum in harmony with itself again. We underestimate this because we look for change in noise, in dramatic gestures, in the intensity of effort. Yet the breath works in silence, subtle but immediate. Imagine the body as an instrument left out of tune by years of stress, fear, or grief. Breath is the tuning, invisible and patient, bringing each string back into resonance. One breath may not feel like much, but repeated, it restores the symphony. And when the instrument of the body is tuned, the quantum field responds. Life aligns. Synchronicities appear. What seemed chaotic begins to fall into rhythm. Think of a moment when you stood at a crossroads of decision, uncertain, anxious, perhaps even afraid. In those moments, the mind tends to spiral, racing through scenarios, replaying fears. But when you pause, when you allow 60-second conscious breathing before acting, something remarkable happens. The spiral softens, the fog clears, the heart offers guidance that the rushing mind could not hear. This is not imagination. This is physiology. The coherence created by breath sharpens perception, making choices clearer, aligning action with intention. So many souls walk through life feeling disconnected, as if the universe has grown silent, as if guidance has abandoned. Yet what if the silence is not absence, but invitation? What if the answers are present, but drowned out by the noise of shallow breath? Tight chest, restless mind. Breath, when met with awareness, opens the channel again. It reminds the body of its wholeness. It reminds the soul of its connection. With each inhalation, we receive life. With each exhalation, we surrender control. In this rhythm, intimacy with the divine is restored. Perhaps you feel weary of strife, tired of chasing peace. The beauty of breath is that it asks for no effort beyond noticing. It was with you in your first moment of life, and it will remain until your last. Every breath between is a chance to return. You do not need to earn. You do not need to wait for the right time. The very breath you are taking now holds the power to retune your body, to soften your heart, to awaken your consciousness. Remember this: breath is not just survive. Breath is prayer. Breath is alignment. Breath is the bridge between your body and the quantum field, between your finite form and the infinite presence that surrounds you. When you honor it, even for moments, you awaken not only your biology, but your spirit. And in that awakening, life begins to flow with a grace that feels both ancient and utterly new. The unnoticed port, how pause between actions, activates quantum awareness. Life, for most, unfolds as a chain of tasks. One ends, another begins. You finish the call and immediately answer a message. You leave one room already thinking of the next. You close one tab only to open another. The body moves, the mind races, but rarely is there space between. And yet, It is in these spaces, the unnoticed pause, the delicate intervals between actions, that consciousness waits to awake. The tragedy is not that we are too busy, but that in our rushing, we overlook the portals that were always present. Bruce Lipton reminds us that the subconscious thrives on repetition. It feeds on patterns. It finds its power not in the exceptional moment, but in the predictable loop. And this is why the in-between holds such possibility. When we pause between one action and another, even for a breath, even for half a minute, the subconscious loses its grip. It does not know what to do with silence. In that stillness, its control weakens and awareness slips through the cracks. The shift then does not occur during the task itself, but in the delicate space between. Think of music. A song is not only notes, it is also silence. Without the pauses, sound would collapse into noise. It is the spaces that give rhythm, the rests that give meaning. Life is no different. When you move from one action to another without pause, existence becomes a blur, a constant noise of doing. But when you create space between actions, even brief, the rhythm of consciousness emerges. You begin to hear the silent music of awareness. You begin to feel life not as a rush, but as a dance. Picture yourself standing before a doorway. Normally, you would pass through without thought. But imagine pausing there for 30 seconds. Eyes soft, breath calm, presence awake, nothing dramatic. Yet as you enter the room, you are not the same person who would have walked through without pause. The energy you carry is different. The awareness you bring has shifted. This is how quantum awareness works. Not in monumental gesture, but in the subtle redirection of intention. Each pause is a threshold, chance to step into life not as a machine, but as a conscious being. Perhaps you have felt the exhaustion of rushing from task to task, believing that the only way to survive is to keep moving. Yet this endless movement leaves the soul empty, disconnected, and weary. The pause restores what rushing steals. In the gap, you remember yourself. In the silence, you remember the presence that was hidden beneath the noise. Even a brief pause before answering the phone, before opening a door, before shifting your attention, is enough to remind the nervous system of coherence. These small thresholds become sacred passages into awareness. This is the portal we so often miss. Not a place we must travel to, not a ritual we must prepare for, but an opening already woven into the fabric of every day. To live with pauses is to live in rhythm with life itself. To skip them is to drown in repetition. The difference between unconscious existence and awakened presence is not measured in years, but in moments. The pause is where choice returns. The pause is where you step out of the program and into the field of infinite possibility. Remember this, the task itself is not your life. The pause between tasks is where life reveals itself. In music, the silence between notes makes the melody. In your journey, the silence between actions creates consciousness. And each time you step into that silence, even for seconds, you are not just resting, you are awakened. We began with a simple invitation. What if awakening your consciousness did not demand hours, rituals, or impossible effort, but could be woven gently into the very fabric of your daily life? Through these reflections, you have walked with me across 5 gateways: the truth of autopilot, the myth of big change, the hijacking of dopamine, the hidden frequency of breath, and the unnoticed portals between actions. Each one points to the same revelation. Transformation is not distant. It is here. It is now. It is already within you. So many carry silent burdens. Loneliness that lingers even in crowded rooms. Grief that never fully fades. Exhaustion from trying again and again, only to find themselves circling back to the same patterns. The subconscious, with its loops and repetitions, makes life feel like a script already written. But what you have seen is that even the smallest interruption, 2 minutes of stillness, 5 conscious breaths, a pause at the threshold of a doorway, has the power to soften the momentum of years. What felt heavy, immovable, begins to shift, not in grand explosions, but in gentle, steady ripples. Science affirms what the mystics have always whispered. The brain rewires not through rare intensity, but through daily repetition. The soul heals not in escape, but in return. Each micro-meditation you offer yourself is both a seed and a prayer. A seed that, with repetition, grows into coherence, clarity, and peace. A prayer that aligns your body with your intention and your spirit with the infinite field of possibility. Every small pause is a reminder to your cells, to your heart, to your consciousness. I am here. I am alive. I am connected. You may not always notice the change as it unfolds. Drops of water carve stone slowly, but over time, the carving becomes a river, and the river shapes the land. In the same way, Your pauses will reshape your identity, not by force, but by the quiet insistence of presence. This is why it is never too late. Past choices, disappointments, none of these erase your power to pause. None of these remove your access to the silence that waits for you, always beneath the noise. And so we close, not with pressure, but with remembrance. You are not alone in your longing. You are not broken in your struggles. The universe is not silent toward you. You are already held, already seen, already guided. All it takes is the courage to pause, to breathe, to listen again. Transformation does not arrive from outside. It awakens from within, in the spaces you create to hear your own soul. Let us seal this journey with words that are not merely spoken but felt. Let them echo not just in the mind, but in the heart, the body, the field around you. I am aligned with the silence between moments. I am free from unconscious repetition. With every breath, I awaken my quantum consciousness. And as these words rest within you, know this: the pauses you create today are not small. They are the gateways to a life lived awake, aware, and in harmony with the deepest truth of who you are.